Early on May 2nd, news travelled of GoFirst abruptly stopping flight bookings. Within hours, it issued a press statement where it said that it will be approaching the National Company Law Tribunal filing for a voluntary insolvency. The airline said that it was compelled to take this action because it could not meet its financial obligations as a result of the situation facing Pratt & Whitney engines. The airline said that because of the inability of Pratt & Whitney to provide spare engines and to carry out maintenance on these engines, it had incurred a loss of Rs 10,800 crores. Remember, GoFirst is a low-cost carrier owned by the Wadia Group, who owned Britannia and was incorporated in April 2004. The insolvency decision, as well as cancellation of flight bookings, took even the DGCA by surprise, which served a show cause notice on the airline. The problem with the engines and Pratt & Whitney's failure to repair or replace them had resulted in half of GoFirst's fleet, or 28 out of 54 of its aircraft, being grounded because of the inability of the engine manufacturer to replace or repair the underperforming gear turbofan or GTF engines. Remember, Pratt & Whitney is the exclusive supplier of the gear turbofan engines which propel GoFirst's A320 aircraft, which are used by many Indian carriers for domestic routes. In the press statement, the airline also accused Pratt & Whitney for failing to comply with the order of the Singapore International Arbitration Centre on March 30th, asking it to supply GoFirst 10 serviceable spare leased engines by April 27, 2023 and further spare engines per month until December 2023. It said that had Pratt & Whitney complied with the order, the airline would have returned to full operations by August or September of 2023. The following day, the airline approached the NCLT and sought admission of its insolvency plea and also requested for an interim moratorium from lessors and lenders taking adverse action against it. The premise of the moratorium was that it would be difficult to run GoFirst as a going concern under the insolvency resolution if lessors were to repossess planes over unpaid dues of 2,660 crore rupees. The airline's total dues to various creditors, including vendors and banks, amount to over Rs 11,000 crore. Pratt & Whitney on its part said that GoFirst had a lengthy history of missing its financial obligations. There's obviously an impact of this crisis on the airline's employees as well as passengers. It is important to note here that the airline employees, such as pilots, have not been paid their salaries for the month of April. In fact, their salaries for the month of March only arrived in the last week of April. And salaries in general were delayed since October last year. They had also been severely slashed following the pandemic, even though other airlines had started restoring various allowances. On May 6, the airline also told the NCLT that a total of 19 lakh passengers were booked with it for future travel dates, even as it kept extending flight cancellations until the DGCA stepped in order to ask the airline to stop selling air tickets altogether. The total refunds owed are estimated to be Rs 900 crores. While the DGCA has ordered the airline to process all refunds, it is not quite clear how it will enforce this order. At first, the NCLT court was not too convinced with GoFirst's plea and raised some very tough questions. It asked how the airline could run as a going concern with the remaining 26 aircraft if those two were powered by the same Pratt & Whitney engines which the airline claimed were underperforming. It also asked how the interim resolution professional could run an airline when GoFirst's own management could not do so. But despite the grilling, to everyone's surprise, the NCLT on May 10th admitted GoFirst's plea for insolvency and appointed Abhilash Lal from Alvarez and Marsal as the interim professional who could take over the management of the airline as the airline's board now stood suspended. The court has restrained all lessors and creditors from taking steps to either recover dues or terminate aircraft leases. It has also restrained the DGCA from accepting any request from lessors for deregistration of aircraft. The regulator as well as airports have been barred from withdrawing airport slots granted to the airline. Suppliers of aviation turbine fuel have also been ordered not to terminate fuel supply over pending dues. But we still don't know when the airline will fly. Neither has Alvarez and Marcel said anything, and the DGCA too has maintained silence since the NCLT order. The sufferers, of course, are the passengers who are booked for travel and have no clarity on what to do. According to some reports, the airline plans to resume operations by May 24th with a limited number of aircraft. But the return to the skies is going to be far from smooth. Before the court order, lessors had already terminated lease agreements for as many as 45 of 54 aircraft and also requested the DGCA to deregister aircraft so that they could be moved out of the country. The court has granted moratorium. The order was issued on May 10th and cannot be applied retrospectively, which is something that lessors maintain. Some lessors have already appealed against the NCLT order before the Appellate Tribunal or the NCLAT, while others are waiting for the DGCA's decision on deregistration. Not only is there uncertainty over the aircraft that GoFirst will have in its fleet, its pilots are also fast leaving the airline because of unpaid salaries and uncertain future. Since May 2, Air India and Indigo have carried out aggressive recruitment drives, and a total of 500 pilots are estimated to join those two airlines as well as Akasa. Air India alone is known to be recruiting 350 pilots and has issued joining letters to as many as 50, constrained partly due to training infrastructure. The immediate impact of all these developments is that airfares on certain leisure routes have already shot up. But the larger implication for the domestic aviation industry is that the blanket moratorium granted by NCLT, which prohibits recovery of aircraft by lessors, will fuel concerns among lessors and creditors about risks associated with aircraft leasing in India. This will translate into higher risk premiums for Indian airlines, resulting in higher lease rentals for domestic carriers and increase in cost of doing business, which could ultimately translate into higher airfares. Lessors maintain that lease rentals of as many as 45 aircraft of GoFirst were already terminated before the court order of May 9, and so the order cannot apply retrospectively, and therefore at least 3 lessors have already moved the Appellate Tribunal. Apart from this, the GoFirst move that took even the DGCA by surprise has once again raised questions about the failure of the Indian regulator to assess the financial viability of domestic carriers. While senior DGCA officials have often maintained that their job is not to look into private financial affairs of airlines, but focus on safety, the fact is that an airline's financial health impacts its ability to provide reliable as well as safe operations. Lastly, there is also the question of refunds, with an estimated amount of 900 rupees crore. If you are among those passengers who have been affected due to GoFirst's cancellation of flights, do share your experience with us in the comment section below.